Memento Mori is the second installment in the Whispering Corridors franchise, a series of standalone horror movies that aren't connected in any way, but instead share similar themes, with each one being set at an all-girls high school. So you don't need to watch them in any order, and there are a few that I personally wouldn't recommend watching at all. But today, I'm going to be talking about Memento Mori, a chilling tale that uses a lesbian love story as the foundation for quite a haunting experience, as it follows a high school girl who comes across a shared diary belonging to a lesbian couple at her school. But once she starts reading the diary, she becomes captivated by the contents and soon finds herself slipping into a sort of state of psychosis that worsens after one of the girls commits suicide. Now, it might sound like a pretty spooky premise, but it's more of an art house horror movie that initially appears to be more of a romantic drama, grounded in this high school setting during the late 90s. So there is a focus on how this relationship is perceived during this setting and time period, and how it affects both women, which makes for a pretty good drama. However, it's this approach in exploring the relationship through the diary that creates this level of mystery and slowly becomes more haunting as light horror elements begin to sprinkle in. But before the horror aspect is really introduced, we're welcomed in with a sequence that captures the essence of a high school classroom, as we see students behaving quite playfully before the teacher walks in. And this opening sequence effectively sucks me into this environment, as it carries a familiar and appropriate youthfulness that remains consistent throughout the rest of the movie, which I think is an important aspect to really get the full experience with the horror on the horizon. Because the horror isn't exactly the most scariest in-your-face horror. There are a few genuinely horrific scenes, but for the most part, it's a lot more atmospheric and heavily plays off of this high school dynamic. So you need to be able to put yourself in the shoes of these teenage girls as the events of the movie unfold. And I think joining them in their classroom like this is an effective way of allowing you to embrace this atmosphere from their perspective, especially after their classmate commits suicide. You can really feel the atmosphere shift, while this sense of uneasiness begins to linger as these students are dealing with their emotions in real time after the shocking nature of their classmate's death. So with this mindset, even though the horror is fairly minimal, it becomes heightened through this perspective in a way that's still quite impactful without necessarily being scary for the viewer. And even though all of this classroom stuff is sort of happening in the background, it's a key component in maintaining an authentic and ominous tone, while the focus remains on the lesbian love story and the student reliving it through the diary. It then becomes fairly horrifying when you see how it specifically affects the reader, who almost becomes detached from reality the more she's drawn to the diary and this couple. And when you place this story among this backdrop, it all builds off of each other and comes together to deliver a terrific finale where the horror really pays off on this high school dynamic, as it reincorporates a number of earlier ideas that are scattered throughout, and it's very exciting to watch. So even if the potential scare factor might pale in comparison to the other movies in the franchise, I think the horror is implemented pretty nicely in support of the story, and I really liked how it blends in with the high school setting. I also liked how the movie incorporates this diary, because the events of the movie unfold over the course of one day. But through this diary, we get to see a number of flashbacks of key moments that adds more weight to what's happening in the present. And these flashback sequences typically portray a warm and loving image of this relationship that feels quite sweet to watch, as Park Ye-Jin and Lee Young-Jin have great chemistry. Watching them together on screen makes it easy to understand how someone could pick up their diary and get lost in their world. and having this third-person perspective offers a somewhat childlike curiosity that adds to the intriguing nature of how the relationship is explored. On top of that, the diary also features a number of pages with some creepy imagery that sort of silently offers more depth for the women in this relationship, as it invites you to think about how they might be feeling as to why they would include such imagery in a shared couple's diary that otherwise appears to be full of love. It's another great aspect of the movie that clearly has a lot of thought and effort behind it, as it provides the necessary substance while equally building up on the drama and horror elements, as well as expressing the romance between the two. So there's a lot to take in here, and there's a great amount of quality driving the movie forward, as the story deals with the primary themes of love, jealousy, friendship, and loneliness, all within this high school setting, as the filmmakers do well in making the setting feel more expansive and lively by utilizing different aspects of the high school life. And it's further supported by the youthful performances from Lee Young-Jin, Kim Gyu-Ri, Park Ye-Jin, Hyo-Jin, and a supporting cast that adds another layer of authenticity to this high school atmosphere. It's also accompanied by quite a chilling soundtrack with pieces of classically inspired music and a particularly unsettling choral song, as well as some good cinematography with a focus on handheld shots that nicely places you among the students. Needless to say, I really like this movie, and I think the directors did a great job for the most part. However, I do have one pretty major criticism, and that's down to how some parts of the movie are structured and edited, as there's a handful of scenes that just kind of appear abruptly in a way that can feel quite jarring and disjointed. It's not really an issue on repeat viewings, but when I first watched this movie, I do remember being a bit confused at how some scenes played out as a result of how they were edited together. So if it's your first time watching this movie, then it might feel a bit off-putting at times. And I've even seen some people dislike this movie partly for its editing and structure, which is somewhat understandable. But if you're looking for a horror movie that isn't really scary and delivers more of a haunting experience with a good and thoughtful story, then I'd highly recommend watching this movie. And I personally think it's the best one in the Whispering Corridors franchise. Although, I do think the fourth installment, Voice, is a close second in terms of themes, horror, and execution. And I already have a video talking about that movie on my channel. But before I end this video, I wanted to briefly show you this pretty nice 6-disc Ultimate Edition box set for Memento Mori. Disc 1 comes with a standard definition copy of the movie. Disc 2, however, comes with a 3-hour rough cut of the movie labeled Memento Mori, unedited and unseen. And like the title suggests, it's a version of the movie that contains an extra 80 minutes of unseen footage. But as a whole, it's largely unedited, with a number of scenes lacking in dialogue, music, or visual effects. It does, however, offer a version of the movie that is completely restructured and even recontextualizes a number of key plot points. So it's still quite interesting to watch, and some of the extra scenes actually removes a lot of that disjointedness that comes with the theatrical version. Unfortunately, this 3-hour version doesn't come with English subtitles, and considering it's largely unedited, it's not exactly the most appealing version to watch unless you're a big fan of the movie. But I found it to be rather fascinating, and I think it's a pretty cool thing to have. Disc 3 comes with over 2 hours of behind-the-scenes footage, interviews, and featurettes. Again, there are no English subtitles, but the behind the scenes offers some footage that didn't even make the unedited and unseen version, and I found it quite interesting to see what else was cut from both versions of the movie. I also typically enjoy watching behind the scenes content regardless of subtitles, so this is another nice disc to have. Disc 4 takes a look at some of the director's short films prior to making Memento Mori, as well as catching up with them 5 years after the release for a 1-hour interview. Now, one of the short films does actually come with English subtitles, but the rest of the contents of this disc, however, do not come with English subtitles. Although, there is currently a re-upload of the 1-hour interview here on YouTube that does include English subtitles. So if you're interested in that, then I'll leave a link in the description. And this channel has also uploaded some other behind the scenes content with English subtitles, which is definitely good to see and very much appreciated. Disc 5 comes with a high definition copy of the movie, which is very nice to have, as I believe this is the only way to watch this movie in HD even after 20 plus years. And finally, Disc 6 comes with the soundtrack for the movie, which is another nice addition to this box set, as there's quite a few memorable songs in the soundtrack that I really liked. The box set also comes with a printed replica of the diary from the movie, and even though I can't read the Korean writing, it's a great way to complete the box set, and it's interesting to see some of the diary pages that weren't shown in the movie. So overall, while it's a bit unfortunate that almost all of the extra content does not come with English subtitles, I still think it's a pretty cool box set to have, especially for the HD disc alone, and I enjoyed being able to see all the behind the scenes content, as well as the 3-hour unedited and unseen version. That being said, this box set released back in 2005, so it's long out of print and is pretty rare to come across. You might be able to find someone reselling it, but I can imagine it'll be pretty expensive. So with that in mind, I just wanted to briefly showcase this box set for those who may not be able to buy it. And if you've made it to the end of the video, and you're interested in more South Korean movie reviews, then consider subscribing to the channel, and thanks for watching Thirst for Film.